Fullback, very, very attacking. He's in the 88th and 92nd percentile.
And he went on a run of, up until his injury in December, being, I think, potentially the best defender in the Premier League. He was unbelievable.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to another Premier Pundits podcast. We're covering Southampton today, and I'm very glad and honoured to be joined by Tom Leach, Southampton correspondent for Hampshire Live, who's going to talk to us a little bit about the Saints, have a little bit of a recap on last season, and hopefully, some positive spin on the upcoming campaign. So, Tom, very welcome to the show. Thanks for joining us. How have things been?
Yeah, it's been good. Yeah, looking forward to the new season. I think, like all of us, I'm still thinking about that England penalty shootout pretty much every minute of every day. But it's going to be good when the club season emerges and we get to get back to the normal Premier League show on the road every weekend.
Yeah, back to the day job. I mean, as this obviously a Southampton supporter and following England as well, were you a little bit disappointed that maybe James Ward-Prowse didn't make a cut into that final 26-man Gareth Southgate squad?
Do you know what? I was surprised at first that he didn't. I was lucky enough to be in some of the early press conferences with Gareth Southgate. I asked him about Ward-Prowse and about Danny Ings, because I think a lot of people forget that if this tournament was played when it should have been played a year ago, Danny Ings was going into that tournament having scored 22, 23 goals that campaign. He probably would have been in the squad. But yeah, I think Ward-Prowse was unlucky not to be there this summer. But I mean, after the first game, Calvin Phillips's performance was so good and Declan Rice is always going to be there that it became pretty clear that if he had have gone, he probably wouldn't have played. And Jude Bellingham, I mean, you can see the decision. Jude Bellingham is one for the future. He's going to be there for the next few tournaments. So, I think from a Southampton point of view, it's a shame that he wasn't there, but I think we could all kind of see the thinking behind the decision.
I mean, maybe the silver lining on the cloud is potentially if, with Ings and Ward-Prowse not going, and if they had got minutes and they had have excelled, and yes, they're well known and they're eulogised in the Premier League, but that opens it up maybe to other clubs to come sniffing around throughout Europe. So maybe on the flip side of that, it just keeps them a little bit under the radar, hopefully.
Yeah, it's always the case. It keeps them fit as well, which I think is a big thing with James Ward-Prowse. He's played every minute of, I think, Southampton's last, I want to say 60 Premier League games. It's definitely more than 2 seasons. And in all competitions, it's something like 80 games now. He's been there for every single minute. So could he have gone away with England and played all those games and come back and carried on doing that for Southampton? Probably not. But even without Danny Ings and James Ward-Prowse going, they still had Jannik Vestergaard, who went off with Denmark, got all the way to the semi-finals. He's now, no doubt, he's now on loads of clubs' radars now going into the summer. So, I suppose there is that benefit. But yeah, I guess from a Southampton point of view, though, you always want to see your players, playing for England. And I'm sure Ward-Prowse has probably got a lot of caps to come.
Yeah, I'm sure he has. He's a massive, massive fantasy favourite of mine, James Ward-Prowse. And I mean, we're here to talk about Southampton today. Unfortunately, I don't want to talk about England and just Ward-Prowse and Ings. That could be a separate show in itself. But before we look ahead to the new campaign, I want to just have a quick, look back and a recap on 2020, 2021. Southampton came into the season off a great project restart. They carried that. You are thinking, could they carry that momentum forward? And they lost the opening 2 fixtures of the new campaign, but they, and one of those was a heavy defeat at home to Tottenham. And then they went on a run of, I think they won 5 of the next 6, which included a 3-3 draw at Stamford Bridge. Looking back to that time, did that defeat against Tottenham at home in the manner of the goals, in the way Heung-min Son and Harry Kane, destroyed that same sort of backline, was that a defining moment early on for maybe Ralph Hasenhuttl and his backroom staff and the players to say, right, well, actually, something needs to change. Otherwise, we're going to be dragged into that relegation dogfight from day one?
I think they went into the season still with that momentum that you mentioned, where things were looking really good. And do you know what? In those first 2 games, I remember the Palace defeat was okay. It wasn't poor, not by any means. The goals were very Roy Hodgson goals, really, for Palace. I remember the Spurs defeat not being that bad, which is a strange thing to say when they conceded 5, but they seemed to play a line that was higher than they'd ever done before. And that was picked up on at the time. And as you say, after that moment, it kind of was a turning point in a way, because that line went, it never came back. And then against Burnley next time out, in came Jannik Vestergaard. And he went on a run of, up until his injury in December, being, I think, potentially the best defender in the Premier League. He was unbelievable for Southampton. He was crucial in that rise to the top of the table. I think that was somewhat of a turning point for them, definitely defensively. It kind of, I think, if anything, it opened the manager's eyes to something that was going wrong, something he was trying, knew that wasn't working. And yeah, from that point on, up until the injuries kicked in, kind of Christmas time, there was a bit of stability, and that stability was really crucial in that early season rise.
Yeah, and you touched upon there about that sort of glut of injuries that came about, and I suppose after going on that mini run, that unbeaten run, you then, so it's the hope that kills you. You look at the top half of the table, then you maybe consider, could we push for Europe? Looking at the way the season sort of pitted out, as a Southampton supporter, is that disappointing? Being unable to sort of build on that early season momentum, and what do you think the main reasons as to why Southampton just faded so badly?
It was kind of something of a, I don't want to say sacrifice, but they reached a situation, Southampton, when things were going so well. In November, they were top of the Premier League for a night, or even just a few hours, I think it was. And there was kind of a decision behind the scenes that, look, Southampton are a club who can potentially win the FA Cup. So a decision was made by that point that they were going to go on an FA Cup run, and that they were probably going to sacrifice a few Premier League points to do that. They did. They got to the semi-finals of the FA Cup. They put all their eggs in the FA Cup basket, but the problem with that is they sacrificed a lot more points in the league than they thought they were going to by doing that. Now, on top of that, there were the injuries, as we spoke about. I mean, I remember I can't forget the Man United defeat at Old Trafford that night, which was a night when I think Kane Ramsey played at right back. Alex Jankovic came in the middle. He got sent off after 70 seconds. A few other youngsters were in there. I think in total there was probably, I want to say 10 injuries in the squad at that point, which when you're a team like Southampton without the depth, and we'll talk about, the summer transfer window that they've had so far in a minute, and trying to add that depth. But when you're a team who don't really have a squad that's that broad, 10 injuries you can't live through that. We saw how much it hurt Liverpool this season, and that's a massive squad with so much talent. Southampton can't afford a squad anywhere near that. So they were pushing for this FA Cup run. There was a spell when they played Wolves in the league, and then Wolves in the cup, and then Arsenal in the league, and then Arsenal in the cup. They won the 2 cup ones. They lost the 2 league ones, which I think pretty much tells the story of what they were going for at that time.
Yeah.
And then they kind of really struggled then to get back into any kind of flow. Danny Ings started to have injuries here and there. He'd kind of, bizarrely, Southampton didn't really miss Danny Ings' goals when he wasn't playing. He would often go out the team, and Nathan Tella would come in, or Che Adams would come in, and there would be goals there. It was the games when Danny Ings came back from injury and it'd take him a few games to get going. That's when they'd miss the goals and they'd lose those games, or they'd get draws there. And then, it just really kind of hit home that, if Southampton are going to push for the FA Cup to get to semi-finals and finals of those kind of competitions, and they're to aim for that top half finish in the league that they kind of want, they need a bigger squad. So that's kind of been the main aim now, putting last season behind them and looking at the new season.
Yeah, I mean, just to sort of help context how bad that run was, I think they only had 4 wins in 21 Premier League games, and the worst in the Premier League, so the worst record than those 3 relegated sides. And during that period, they conceded 49 goals. It was only Crystal Palace and West Brom who conceded 37, or the next 2 in the Premier League. And like you say, they just know how they survived and stayed in the top flight. Ultimately, based on those shocking run of results, really is a huge surprise. But like you say, onwards and upwards, we can put that season behind us. And first thing is that I was looking at when I was preparing to talk to yourself, and I've just seen your latest article after I had done that. The thing that screams to me with the current Southampton squad is a massive lack of depth in there. I mean, we weren't looking at a big squad anyway. I know you lost Minamino, went back to Liverpool. Ryan Bertrand obviously left the club now. Now I know we have Romain Perraud that's coming to the team, and Walcott, who's signed a permanent deal, but there are still gaping holes within that squad that need to be filled in terms of even just, if they were to go on another run where they're picking up injuries. I mean, is there anything on the horizon in terms of Southampton's recruitment and looking to, bring players in? I know Matt Grimes has been linked, Adam Armstrong, even my hometown club, Isaac Hayden, but that's more of a swap deal with Lamina. Is there any hope as it currently stands for Southampton supporters in strengthening that squad?
Look, the main thing that Southampton wanted to do early was to replace Ryan Bertrand. That was the main aim of the early months of the window. There was an inquiry about Minamino, whether he'd come back. As you mentioned, Southampton need, to be honest, they need probably 2 left backs. They've got one done. They probably need another right back. They probably need another body in midfield now that Alex Jankovic has left. They probably need another winger. They definitely need another striker. There was a moment at the end of last season when I think it was Liverpool away, Danny Ings was out injured. Nathan Teller and Che Adams, I think, were the 2 that started up front, and they had about 15 chances over the game and they missed all of them. And after the game, Hasenhuttl said, we need to keep our eyes open here for a new striker because we just need someone to push these 2. There's so many areas they need to fill. There's the main targets at the moment are fullback and striker. They're the 2 ones that predominantly they need to get done. Looking at the whole league, it's been a very slow window already. No one's really got the money to get deals done. I don't think there's anything to be too concerned about right now. The main one they needed to get done early, they've got done. They're keen on Adam Armstrong, they're keen on Brandon Williams, but it seems like there's probably going to be a few challenges with those 2. There's reports of a £2 million loan fee for Brandon Williams, who's also on a lot of money for a player who's only 20 years old. That's all got to be negotiated and ironed out if there's going to be any deal done there. Then Adam Armstrong, there's already been, as far as I understand it, one approach made that was rejected. As far as what I can gauge on that, I think Blackburn want close to 20 million for him, which a player who's in the final year of his deal now is probably they're not going to get for him. There's also a lot of talk there of a 40% sell-on fee to Newcastle, which that will drive the price up, but it shouldn't for Southampton. So obviously Blackburn won't want to sell him for 8 million if it means they only get 5. But at the same time, Blackburn are going to want to drive that up, and Southampton aren't going to pay it. So there's a lot to be ironed out. It doesn't seem like either deal are particularly close, but you never know what they're working on behind the scenes and what deals are going to pop up out of nowhere. I think Perraud was a really clever one. Looks a really good left back. He was in France Football's Team of the Year last season in Ligue 1. So there's no reason why he shouldn't be a great success. He's still quite young as well. But yeah, in terms of deals on the horizon, I think Southampton fans are hoping that a few that they know nothing about will pop up out the blue and be kind of already done and dusted. But I'm not at this stage convinced that any of that close.
Yeah, I mean, my next question was going to be about Perraud and what you actually know about the young French fullback. Looking at some of his underlying data, he looks to be a fullback, a very, very attacking fullback. When you look at his expected goals, expected assists, created chance, he's in the 88th and 92nd percentile across the top 5 leagues across Europe. Defensively, looking at maybe how Southampton didn't defend last season, is that a little bit of a concern that Hasenhuttl maybe focusing more on those attacking areas for the fullback as more of a flying wing back, as opposed to somebody who's just really going to sit in there and defend and build that solid foundation for Southampton to build on?
I think it's one of the things I'm quite interested to see how they manage it during pre-season, because for those who didn't see Southampton last season, their defence kind of play quite fluid. So they're a back 4. We Southampton, they play that 4-2-2-2, a 4-4-2, but with the wingers quite narrow. So they do play that 4 at the back, but they often switch into a 5 when Bertrand, who was at left back, would step in and they become a 3. He'd be the left-sided man of the 3 central defenders, and then Walker Peters could go. Nathan Redmond on the left would drop back a little bit to kind of form that 5 at the back. If Perraud is attacking as we're told he's going to be, he probably isn't going to be able to step in and be that left-sided centre-back of the 3. So Kyle Walker-Peters on the right, he can't do that either. So it looks like instead of having kind of a Walker-Peters who attacks and a Bertrand who's quite conservative, it's going to be two fullbacks who go. So that's going to need someone else from somewhere else on the pitch to step in to be that three. Now, they have got Oriol Romeu who can do it. James Ward-Prowse played a lot of games at right back for Southampton over the years. He could do it. But I can't see them wanting to use Ward-Prowse as a kind of half centre-back. I mean, he's a lot more comfortable going forward. If anything, he sometimes feels like he's a little bit held back playing as a defensive midfielder for Southampton. Or will they, start scratch and they will play a five? They've got Mohamed Salisu in the squad, who's proven he played kind of the last 10, 15 games of the season quite regularly, either as a left centre-back or a left-back. So he could be that man on the left. But that's a start from scratch. And then you end up with, something completely new. The reason I don't think that will happen this season is because of, for those who don't know, Ralph Hasenhuttl playbook, which is a style of play. It's that 4-2-2-2. The under 23s play it. The under 18s are going to start playing it very soon. Then the 16s, 15s, 14s, soon they'll all be playing it. We're quite a long way into that process for the manager to decide it's now a five, guys, because it might be quite difficult for him to implement that. But yeah, it'll be interesting to see what they do with Perraud.
Cool. And purely from a fantasy perspective, and this was a real head scratcher, particularly towards the end of the season. Are we any further forward in knowing who's going to nail down that number one spot? Is it McCarthy or is it Forster? Because Hasenhuttl was flip-flopping between the two. I always got the impression that Hasenhuttl wasn't very keen on Forster. I mean, for me, there may be a little bit of bias in there, ex-Newcastle. I always rated him and always thought he was a decent shout and couldn't really understand why he wasn't starting. And he seemed to do okay. And then McCarthy was coming in and, that situation surely can't continue. He really has to, you would think, put his faith in one goalkeeper and stick with him. Yeah,
well, Hasenhuttl arrived at the club and he was really the first manager to give Angus Gunn a go. Angus Gunn did well. And then the 9-0 at Leicester City happened and we never saw Angus Gunn again, really. Alex McCarthy came in, did really well. There was a moment last season, I think, when Southampton were flying high at the start of the season, it was him and Emi Martinez in the Premier League with the two goalkeepers with the most clean sheets. He was flying. And then again, the 9-0 happened to him, two keepers in a row. And then he kind of fell away and in came Fraser Forster. And then, as you say, end of the season, they kind of, swapped back and forth. Quite a bizarre, I've not really ever heard a manager say that to us in a press conference before, that he's kind of said, well, they're going to Alex will play 2 games and then Fraser can play 2 games and then Alex can play 2 games and we'll just see how it goes. And we thought, okay, I suppose at that point Southampton were safe pretty much from relegation. So we thought, fair enough, he's starting his pre-season early. The last I've heard of it is that it's going to be the same through pre-season. They're going to play a game each or maybe a half each. He's going to take as much time as he can to look at them. And he also, interestingly, said that this could go on through the season. So sadly, for those picking a fantasy football team, there might not be a keeper nailed down all season long. I know that there's not, but by the looks of it, a keeper on the horizon. I think Hasenhuttl is. I think, as you say, I think he's content with both of them, but I do think he favours McCarthy. But I think at the moment it's just Fraser Forster's performances have been a little bit better out of the two of them. But yeah, I think he does favour McCarthy. So I think he's kind of waiting for a chance when McCarthy gets that bit of form back and then he can keep him. Yeah, I think it's interesting. I think we'll see who wins through that. But I think, over pre-season, I don't think fantasy football fans will get any clues as to which way that's going to go.
Yeah, what a shame. I mean, look, no discussion around Southampton is, we could never discuss Southampton without talking about James Ward-Prowse and Danny Ings. A lot of media speculation linking both players with potential moves away from the club. I think Ward-Prowse has been attracting interest from Aston Villa, although that may have been cooled in recent days. And obviously Danny Ings, given his exploits down at St Mary's. Are we confident that those two players, will remain at the club ahead of the upcoming season?
I think Ward-Prowse is a definite. He's got a long-term deal at the club and he's crucial to everything they do. There's a story I normally tell when I'm asked about this is that after the Leicester City semi-final defeat at Wembley, Hasenhuttl and Ward-Prowse stood on the pitch together for about 30 minutes talking about the game, what went wrong, picking it apart. I think he's so important to where Southampton are heading. He's half a coach, half a player by this point, and he's only 26 years old. You know, he's so crucial for where this football club's heading. I can't see a world where he will leave. It'd take an astronomical bid to prize him away. Danny Ings, you know, it feels like we're in a bit of a strange position with Danny Ings at the minute, where he is so important. And I think it just comes down now to how much Southampton value a season of Danny Ings. The latest noises that we know is that there's been no approach from anywhere for him. It may well be that all clubs are just waiting to see what happens, knowing they could get him for free next summer. Knowing that Southampton will, you know, if they are going to sell him, they're going to try and make some money from it. So it may be beneficial if you're a bigger club to kind of wait 12 months. But look, Hasenhuttl and CEO Martin Semmens, whenever they've spoken to the fans via fan forums or interviews or press conferences, they've always been so confident that Danny Ings will sign. So when you see the reports that he's rejected it, you know, as far as I'm aware, he's not rejected it as such. It's just not been signed. But you know, this is what we had with Ryan Bertrand. It was just not signed, and then it got to the point when he turned up at St Mary's one day and informed the club that he wouldn't be signing it and that he was going to look for other offers. So I don't think we're at that stage with Danny Ings. He's in training with Southampton at the minute. He was training there today. So we know that he's getting his fitness ready for the new season, and it seems like he's focused on Southampton. But yeah, Ward-Prowse, I think, is a definite no. I think Danny Ings at the moment is a bit of a, let's say no for now, but I think we'll see.
No, brilliant. Listen, Tom, I really appreciate your time and your insight and your knowledge. Just before we go, your hopes for Southampton on the upcoming season, realistic hopes. I mean, is there room for optimism there, or, you know, do we need to, I want to say, the caution and hopefully the Saints will bring, you know, some, you know, their recruitment drive will happen and they'll strengthen in the correct places?
Yeah, I think hopes are that between now and maybe August 14th being a bit optimistic, but by the end of the transfer window, you know, there's just a few more bodies in that they can rely on. I think ultimately, you know, they're starting 11 and the kind of Southampton players we're going to see all season are already here. I don't think they're going to bring in any players who will start every game of the season. I think potentially Adam Armstrong, if he lands, might be the most high profile signing. You know, Perraud's done. That's the one they needed. They needed that left back and they've got him. It was just depth beyond that they needed. So just a few more bodies would be really helpful. And then as the season gets underway, yeah, I think, you know, it's going to be hard to replicate the start of last season with how good it was. But the aim for the club is a top 10 finish. That's the aim. That's what they nearly got the season before last. They just missed out on it. And going one step further was what they thought they'd do last season. I think the Southampton fans will be happy with, all things considered, the impact of the pandemic, how hard it's been for them to get signings in. I think if they finished 13th, 14th or above and had a good cup run in one of the two cups, I think they'd be happy. I think we'd take that. Anything more than that, looking at where we are right now, I think it'd be a bonus. I think if they can steer well clear of relegation and we can sort out a future for a striker and a centre-back, then I think they'll be really happy. You
could be talking about Newcastle, Tom. I think we're in a similar predicament. Listen, Tom, been brilliant. Thanks for your time. Tom Leach, Southampton correspondent for Hampshire Live. And thanks everybody for watching. By all means, if you feel free to add comments in the box below. We are covering all 20 Premier League teams ahead of the new campaign. But for today and now, that's Southampton done. The fantastic Tom Leach. And we'll see you again very soon.